Hey guys, tonight we drift up the cloudy slopes of Mount Olympus, where marble columns glow faintly in moonlight and the air feels heavy with incense and thunder. You can almost hear sandals scuffing against polished floors and the clink of golden goblets, echoing through cold, cavernous halls. It should feel divine, but instead it feels like wandering into a family reunion where everyone secretly hates each other. You probably won't survive this without dozing off in self-defense. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake in a few minutes, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge quietly through the Olympian palace, watching Zeus at the head of the table, beard immaculate, eyes already scanning for someone to blame. Hera, his wife and queen, sits stiffly nearby, her crown gleaming but her scowl sharper than any spear. Their marriage, technically the most powerful union in myth, is mostly a competition in passive aggression. Hera catches Zeus sneaking glances toward some mortal down on earth, and Zeus pretends he's just contemplating cloud patterns. You know better clouds don't usually bat their eyelashes. The children at this feast are no better. Ars, the god of war, sulks when no one praises his latest blood-soaked campaign. Athena, goddess of wisdom, smirks at him in the way older sisters do, as if every one of his victories is just another opportunity for her to roll her eyes. This isn't just gossip. It's the foundation of Western storytelling. Historians still argue whether these Olympian quarrels reflect real social tensions in ancient Greek households or whether the poets exaggerated for entertainment. Either way, you're basically watching the first soap opera. You pass a column where Apollo is bragging again. Golden hair, lyre in hand, he boasts about healing plagues and inventing music, but also somehow forgets to mention the time he lost in a music contest to a satyr. His twin Artemis rolls her eyes and vanishes into the woods rather than sit through another verse of his world's greatest bard speech. If you've ever left a family gathering early to avoid your brother's karaoke, you already understand her pain. Meanwhile, Hermes slips between shadows, stealing a sip of nectar and whispering jokes. He's that cousin who shows up at every reunion with stories about entrepreneurship. That sounds suspiciously like pyramid schemes. Still, everyone lets it slide because Hermes also delivers their mail. You can't stay mad at the guy who brings your Amazon packages, or in this case, your sacred prophecies. The atmosphere on Olympus isn't just awkward, it's volatile. Hera is infamous for punishing Zeus's mortal flings, sometimes more harshly than Zeus himself. One mainstream historical fact: ancient Greek writers often used Hera as a stand-in for the real tensions surrounding arranged marriages, where power imbalances were common. But the quirky tidbit? Hera once teamed up with Poseidon and Athena to literally chain Zeus to his throne. Imagine family counseling that requires divine rope and 100 hands to tie knots. A flicker of lightning cuts across the sky, and you remember how fragile the hierarchy feels. Despite being king, Zeus constantly fears rebellion. Poseidon, god of the sea, grumbles about always being second place. Hades, the older brother, skulks underground, muttering that he never even got a seat at the table. Some scholars think these myths mirrored actual politics, city-states jockeying for dominance, alliances forming and fracturing. Others shrug and say, nope, it's just poets with too much wine. Honestly, both explanations sound believable. You pause at a mosaic showing Demeter, goddess of grain, glaring at Zeus after he allowed Hades to abduct her daughter, Persephone. She refuses to let crops grow until Persephone is returned, essentially inventing winter out of spite. It's one of the great cosmic custody battles, a myth that also doubles as the agricultural calendar. Farmers didn't need weather apps, they had Demeter's moods. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen from Egyptian myth? Yeah, this feels equally questionable, but somehow it worked. As the feast drags on, you notice everyone carefully not looking at Hephaestus, the blacksmith god. Born with a limp, thrown off Olympus as a baby, He later limped back with golden machines that carried him around like a parade float. Ancient sources disagree on whether his disability was congenital or punishment from Zeus himself. Historians still argue whether his myths were sympathy stories or backhanded jokes. Either way, Hephaestus married Aphrodite, though she spent most of her time sneaking out to see ours. Messi doesn't even begin to cover it. Back at the table, tensions bubble. Dionysus sloshes wine everywhere, promising ecstasy and liberation, but also tripping over chairs and making Hera sigh like she's already got a headache. The rest of the gods start raising voices, insults flying like arrows. You realize that Olympus isn't so different from your aunt's Thanksgiving dinner, except the turkey here is immortal and the gravy might literally turn into a river. By the time you wander back to the marble balcony, the stars have scattered like spilled jewels over the night sky. Behind you, Zeus thunders a half-hearted decree to restore order. Hera mutters, Ars flexes, Athena smirks, and you, poor guest, already feel the heaviness of eyelids that can't handle another round of family drama. The night drifts on, and you find yourself sliding deeper into the hallways of Olympus, where marble doors don't quite close and whispered arguments seep through like smoke. Affairs and punishments are practically the currency here. Every god has a grudge, every grudge has a consequence, and every consequence spills down onto mortals who definitely did not sign up for any of this. You peek into Zeus's private chambers, probably a mistake. The king of gods is pacing, rehearsing excuses for why he turned into a swan or a bull, or a sudden gust of golden light just to impress mortals. You think it sounds like the worst dating app profile in history. Likes long walks on the beach, casual shape-shifting, allergic to commitment, and yet mortals still fall for him. It never ends well. Take poor Semele, tricked into demanding to see Zeus in his full divine glory, resulting in a flash so bright it burned her to ash. Out of pity, Zeus sewed their unborn child Dionysus into his thigh. Historians still argue whether this tale was meant as coded symbolism for agricultural cycles, or just a weird story told after too much wine. Either way, it's proof that Olympus never heard of normal parenting. Hera, meanwhile, isn't just watching, she's plotting. She rarely punishes Zeus directly, preferring to target his lovers or children. You step carefully as she hisses a plan to torment Heracles, Zeus's most famous illegitimate son, sending madness to drive him into tragedy. Scattering monsters in his path, Hera's vengeance is as creative as it is relentless. Mainstream historians often point out that myths like these highlight real anxieties in Greek society about inheritance and legitimacy. The quirky tidbit? In some fringe versions, Hera actually breastfed baby Heracles by accident, creating the Milky Way when he spit out her divine milk. Talk about cosmic indigestion. Elsewhere, Aphrodite slips gracefully through the halls, perfume trailing like mist. The goddess of love should be above scandal, but her marriage to Hephaestus is one long punchline. She sneaks off with ours, and once when Hephaestus caught them, he trapped them in an unbreakable golden net for all the gods to laugh at. You probably won't survive the second-hand embarrassment. Picture your family's group chat screenshots, but carved forever into myth. Historians still argue whether this myth was satire of arranged marriages or just proof that even gods couldn't resist soap opera plots. Further down the corridor, you stumble into Persephone's seasonal commute, half the year with her mother Demeter, half with Hades in the underworld. That abduction, technically a marriage arrangement, turned into the origin of the seasons. Mortals explained winter not with tilt of Earth's axis, but with a mother's grief. You can almost hear Demeter's sighs in the chill wind. Feel Persephone's footsteps in the thaw of spring. It's haunting, but also strangely beautiful proof that even messy family drama became the backbone of natural cycles. And then there's Apollo, never free from humiliation. Remember how smug he was earlier? Well, here he's begging Zeus to forgive his son Asclepius for daring to bring mortals back from the dead. Zeus, furious at the breach of order, blasted Asclepius with a thunderbolt. Later, though, mortals built entire healing cults in Asclepius's honor, complete with sacred snakes slithering around temples. A quirky fact, in some of those sanctuaries, patients actually slept in the temple. hoping the god would send them dream prescriptions. Imagine a doctor's note that starts with, "So, I saw you in a dream last night." The Olympian mess isn't contained to gods, it constantly spills into mortal lives. King Minos ends up with a wife who falls in love with a bull, thank you, Poseidon. Helen of Troy is born from Zeus's swan encounter, leading directly to the Trojan War. And poor Pandora, crafted as punishment for men, she opens her infamous jar and lets suffering loose. Historians still argue whether this myth reflected anxieties about women gaining independence, or if it was simply ancient mansplaining with extra steps. Either way, thanks to divine drama, humanity gets saddled with every imaginable misery except hope, which conveniently lingers at the bottom of the jar like an unclaimed warranty. You wander back to the balcony, where the gods argue over who gets credit for what invention. Athena insists she gave mortals the olive tree, Poseidon shouts about inventing horses, and Dionysus waves a wine cup to remind everyone that he's responsible for hangovers. They bicker, they boast, they belittle each other, and somehow the world keeps turning. By now, you feel the weight of their chaos pressing down like a heavy blanket. The feuds, the betrayals, the affairs, they're endless. Yet in the strange, drowsy quiet, you realize this mess is exactly what made the myths endure. The gods weren't distant abstractions. They were a dysfunctional family, magnified to cosmic proportions. And maybe that made them relatable. The marble floor cool beneath your feet. You let the voices fade into background static, like distant thunder rolling past the mountains. Their quarrels grow softer, their laughter faint, until you can almost believe Mount Olympus is finally falling asleep to dot. And now, as the last embers of divine squabbles dim, you let the whole noisy household dissolve into mist. The columns blur, the feasts vanish, and the marble underfoot softens into something weightless, like drifting cloud. Your breath slows, stretching out into long, unhurried rhythms. Each inhale feels like gathering a cool night breeze. Each exhale like releasing the day's clutter. The gods, with all their affairs and punishments, recede far above. Their thunder now no louder than a distant heartbeat. Even their voices soften Zeus's booming decree, Hera's sharp mutters. Athena's clever retorts all melting into a gentle hum. As if Olympus itself is sighing into slumber, you float lower, through starlight and silence, until even the weight of stories loosens its grip. Every rivalry, every scandal, every argument turns to dust, drifting away on the calm air. What remains is quiet, steady, and safe. Your eyelids grow heavier, as though the myths themselves are tucking you in. The marble palace of Olympus dissolves into shadow, and you are left with only the comfort of stillness, the slow hum of the night, and the steady rhythm of your own rest. So close your eyes. Breathe deep and let yourself drift gentle, untroubled and completely at peace. Sweet dreams are waiting.